Welcome back to the Red Dice Diaries with John and Hannah.
Hi.
And today we're going to be having a little bit of a Monday moan, or rather I am talking about something which has been sort of, I suppose, I've been finding slightly irritating recently, and handily Hannah's volunteered to be the more balanced, better-natured side of this argument. What are we going to be talking about? Well, we're going to be talking about the shock horror realisation that there are other games besides D&D. So I've noticed this a lot recently, love, when I've been sort of on Facebook and social media and stuff like that, where I've seen a lot of these posts where people, presumably like good-naturedly, are sort of saying, hey, people out there, in case you haven't realised, there's other role-playing games besides D&D. If you need some advice, here's some suggestions. And that's fair enough. I've no problem with people trying to broaden people's horizons with different games. I mean, I didn't start playing with D&D. I've got a lot of games other than D&D. Granted, I play more sort of old school games now, but I'm no stranger to the fact there's other games out there, is what I'm saying. But one thing I do find slightly grating, and it's a minor niggle, but I find it slightly grating that a lot of these sort of like these posts and things that I've seen, they seem to sort of like infer or imply that people are unaware that there's games other than D&D actually out there.
But darling, a lot of people are unaware that there's other games than D&D out there. A lot of people don't even know that an RPG doesn't need to be plugged in necessarily.
See, now, I could understand like someone not knowing about RPGs whatsoever. You know, they might have only heard of D&D because of like Stranger Things or whatever, you know, or some other sort of recent pop culture reference. And I could understand it more if we were talking like years and years ago. Whereas I think now, because of like, if you're online, if you go onto like YouTube or Google or anything like that, and you even vaguely type in anything besides about RPGs, yet you'll get a lot of D&D, particularly 5th edition, because that's like the most sort of like well-selling version of D&D at the moment. But you'll also get a lot of other games that will come up straight away. And I think my sort of issue is less that people are unaware of games, 'cause I'm sure there probably are a few people who are unaware of games. It's I suppose the sort of phraseology of a lot of these posts that seem to like treat people as though they're not capable of sort of going online and doing like a quick Google search. I mean, if you go on Google and type in RPG, you'll get more than D&D coming. In fact, you've got your laptop there, love. Why don't you type in RPG in Google and see what comes up? And I'm sure you will get a shed load of D&D stuff, particularly 5th edition, because that publicity train keeps on rolling. But you just type it in and see what pops up, and you get a load of computer games.
Computer game.
Okay.
Computer game.
Okay, so let's try and like narrow that search down a bit. Type in tabletop RPG, see what happens there. But no, that's a good point. I mean, obviously, a lot of people are more aware of computer RPGs than they might be of tabletop RPGs if they've not encountered them before. That's a valid thing. Yes, if you just type in tabletop RPG.
World of Warcraft.
Okay, yeah, but if you look as well on there, there's also Call of Cthulhu. There's a lot of sort of D&D related stuff on there. But there is at least one non-D&D RPG on there. And when we say there's one non-D&D RPG on there, we're literally talking about like the 4 or 5 results that like Google puts at the top. We're not sort of delving down into it. Although I see that like Anne Summers has made a brief appearance at the top of that. So
I'm not quite sure why it's the first thing that's appeared on my particular Google search. One would have to assume that there's something else in the back of my Google that's told it that I would like the oral fun board game.
Well, all I'm saying is like the internet's obviously been like paying attention to your search history, so that's all I can say. But yeah, if we look on there as well, we can also see there's like board games on there as well, you know, like Mahjong and stuff like that. But perhaps they do have a point. I mean, if we look at the the actual tabletop RPGs on there, the vast number of them are D&D or D&D related in some way.
I hate to say it, love, but I think you've maybe fallen a little bit too deep into your own bubble here. There's an awful lot of people that have never heard of roleplay games at all. I've never been to a workplace where I haven't had to explain what a roleplay game is. I've never been like out with a group of friends who aren't already role players and not had someone, when the subject comes up, go, what's a roleplay game?
Yeah, and perhaps you're right. I mean, it's very difficult for me to speak as someone who put myself in the mindset of someone who's not heard of role-playing games, because I've been playing role-playing games for years. So it's very difficult for me to approach it from that mindset. And it's an interesting point. Do we sometimes get a little too deeply in our own mindset and way of thinking that it becomes difficult to empathise with people who have a different way of thinking or have a different set of like experiences to us? And obviously we know that, not just in RPGs, but we know that in general, that lack of empathy with like people who have different situations, different lifestyles, etc., can cause issues. So I think it's something worth bringing up. But to take it back to the sort of topic we started with, as I said at the start, my sort of disagreement with this isn't so much that someone's saying, oh yeah, if you want to find some other RPGs other than D&D, here's some suggestions, because that's great. As I said at the start, I'm all for people broadening their horizons, and if you only look at one RPG, you might miss something which is better suited to you either as a player or a GM. Like I say, I didn't start with D&D, I didn't start with OSR games, or that's my sort of like preferred avenue of RPGs at the minute. I sort of worked my way around different games and settled on the ones I prefer at the moment, but that might change in a few months, in a few years, as I'm exposed to like other games. Like I say, my disagreement is it seems to assume that if people are interested about RPGs, they're incapable of finding out themselves.
I don't know on that, having not read any of the actual posts you're talking about, because I don't really go on Facebook or.
Well, I'll tell you what, you still got your laptop there.
Mm-hmm.
Type in RPG again, and there was a Wikipedia page I noticed that came up at the top that said RPG. Have a quick look at that Wikipedia page. I mean, like, if we look down at the actual searches, we see there's a tabletop role-playing game Wikipedia page. If we scroll down on there, it gives you like a brief description of what tabletop RPGs are. There's a bit about dice, yada yada yada. Bit about gameplay, giving you the basic rundown of it. So if you scroll down...
The first published roleplay game, Dungeons & Dragons, most games follow this pattern. Isn't unfair. You have a dungeon master, you have your players.
It's talking about the style of play, isn't it? Which is fine. It is. The GM and a group of players' style of play is predominant in tabletop RPGs. We've got a little bit of history. We'll scroll past that. What I wanted to see is there like a list of like examples of tabletop RPGs on there?
It then goes on to other early games.
Traveller.
We've got Traveller, Call of Cthulhu, Paranoia. At the same time, games using fictional worlds like Star Trek, DC Heroes, Marvel Universe, Lord of the Rings, and then
GURPS
Champions, Masquerade,
Paper Faces on Parade,
and then bring it back round to TSR and Wizards of the Coast. And I wonder if perhaps it's also the fact that the companies who own D&D now have the most money to promote it. That if you look for on YouTube people playing roleplay games.
Oh yeah, if you look at actual plays or anything like that, the vast majority will be 5th edition D&D.
Well, straight up we get Geek and Sundry. They do nothing but D&D as far as I know. We've got Tabletop with Will Wheaton, which is obviously they've tried to spread that out, but their mainstay was D&D for a long time. I haven't really watched much of either of them. I know there's Critical Role as well, although there's so much Tabletop and Geek and Sundry that no Critical Roles come up here.
Yeah.
But all of them focus on D&D, presumably because they're getting a little bit of money from it.
Well, yeah, well, there's no doubt, as we've said before, that regardless of whether you like D&D 5th edition or whether you don't like D&D 5th edition, commercially, in terms of like being a success, it's been very successful. They've done a lot of sort of like link ups with other properties. Like there's a sort of a Rick and Morty like style like D&D book out there. There's I forget what the other one was. There's Stranger Things sort of D&D style thing out there, obviously capitalising on that. And sort of when that Stranger Things like 80s nostalgia like vibe was at its height, obviously it was easy to jump on board that train as D&D, because that's when sort of early 80s, like mid 70s was when sort of D&D really got started. So I think it was easy to capitalise on that. So I think you're absolutely right. There do tend to be sort of like one or two companies have obviously been more commercially successful. They've got a bit more money to throw behind their products, to advertise it, to sort of put it out there. And obviously D&D as one of the first RPGs is probably one of the most well known. I mean, when sort of like TSR ceased to trade, if D&D hadn't been a viable property, like no one else would have tried to snap it up to like make new versions of it. And obviously we know that it didn't just disappear. But I mean, so what do you guys think out there? We're just having a bit of a general chat about this. Do you think that it's a little bit patronising, these sort of, hey, if you didn't know, there's other games out there articles, or do you think they serve a useful purpose? After speaking to Hannah, I'm a little bit torn on the topic. I think, yeah, it's definitely useful to give people more options so they can find what they like, what their particular flavour is in terms of tabletop RPGs. But by the same token, I do find some of the articles that I've read come off as more than a little patronising. But is that just a case of I find it a bit patronising because I know about RPGs? Perhaps someone who doesn't might not find it. They might find it more useful. Now, I wish, to be honest, I could remember like the last few articles that I'd seen in more detail on Facebook or whatever, so I could link them in here, but it was a few weeks ago, so I can't remember. So unfortunately I can't post the links. I do apologise for that, but I'm sure if you go online and type in something like different tabletop RPGs to D&D, you'll see a slew of this sort of article. But anyway, give us a call, let us know what you think about this sort of article. You can get in touch with us by sending us an email to rddrpgpodcast@gmail.com, or you can get in touch with us using SpeakPipe and leave us a voicemail message. There'll be a link to that in the description of this show. And until we see you next time, take care, stay safe, and keep gaming. Whatever game you're playing, to be honest, as long as you're having fun.
Bye!